Creativity is allowing yourself to make mistakes. Art is knowing which ones to keep. And if you didn't understand what I just said there, art, A-R-T, art. Art is knowing which ones to keep. Okay, so I'll tell you whose quote that is at the end of the podcast. But today, obviously, I started the podcast a little bit differently. We're going to talk about a little bit of a different subject because a lot of you need to learn how to write, right? You're great at business. You have an idea. We're talking about selling to the government on all these podcasts, and myself included. We can always improve our writing. But I wanted to mix it up in this episode because this is a skill set that is lacking, especially in the writing that you're going to have to do for the federal government. A lot of it is very stale. And even from big companies to small companies, a lot of times what we end up getting, whether we're talking about a capability statement or a sources sought response or a proposal that you're writing, a lot of these end up looking like marketing documents for your company that are very generic. And I've talked about making these specific to what the government is trying to do. But I also want to talk about the act of writing itself, okay? Because we want to get away from being generic, and I'd say focus more on being creative in the way that we try to resonate with the person reading whatever it is you're submitting, whether it's an email, whether it's a sources sought, whether it is a proposal that you're actually going to win a contract on. And all of those things can lead to you winning those big contracts. Okay, so, well, Rick, what does creativity have to do with, in art, have to do with selling to the government? Well, look, writing anything, I look at every proposal, every RFI response, every email, I look at that as an art form. You're trying to express your ideas about how to solve a problem to somebody on the other side and make them think you're the one that can solve it. So if you don't think of yourself as a creative, or you're just like super focused on the business part or starting your business, I want you to take a minute and just think through some of these marketing ideas. I'm going to recommend a book. I shouldn't say marketing ideas, creativity ideas, right? So when you're thinking about writing, when you're thinking about how you're approaching the government and what your solution set is, taking a different perspective is going to be very beneficial for you. Okay. So, if you're a very creative person and you're, involved with this type of process a lot, this might not be the episode for you. But if that's not you, if you're not like, hey, I'm not creative, I'm not definitely listen to this. Okay. So first, a book that came out this year by Rick Rubin. He produced like the Beastie Boys. He's produced 1,000 great bands, great albums. He put this book out called The Creative Act, and it's not about music. It's a simple read, and it's not something you just read right through, but he's got a lot of, I guess you could say, recommendations on how to be more creative. He's sharing a lot of exercises that he has walked bands through. So, I mean, this is one of the people that has created extremely unique and amazing products in the entertainment industry. But we can take that and we can apply that to what we're doing with the government. Okay. So this is a little bit different than probably what you expected on this podcast, but I think that this is going to bring you a lot of value. And I can speak for myself. When I have done things like broken the rules or approached a submission to the government in a creative way, that is absolutely what has driven the best results for me and for my clients that I've represented. So let's walk through some of the things, a couple of things that Rick talks about, the other Rick, in the Creative Act. But these are things that you can do. Let's say you're writing a sources sought, like a 5-page response to the government, right? And you have your traditional, marketing stuff, and you're just trying to whip it out as fast as possible. Take an hour, put that aside, try some of these exercises. Now, one of the things that he says to do, which I think is interesting, is just change the lighting in the room you're in. So he approaches things from like, let's make some changes, okay, just to see how that affects us. And it does. This will affect you. Try writing in a different location. If you're normally writing in the office, maybe go to a Starbucks and get a coffee and just put the headphones on. He recommends playing music. If you don't normally listen to music, try playing music. Try turning the volume up. Okay, see what kind of different results you're getting when you write that way. It's interesting too, because he brings up things you're just like, what are you talking about? But just try it and see what happens, right? So one of the things he says is just double the font size on your Word document when you're typing. That can have, you're going to visualize differently when you're looking at something like that. And I'll give you an example. So, at one point we had it wasn't a source of sought response. It was more of a proposal for another transaction authority. And I believe they were looking for 5 to 10 pages. And I submitted about a page and a half, right? So did I break the rules? Well, I mean, not really. 5 pages was the limit. So I didn't break the rules, but I certainly, most people are trying to max out those 5 pages and tell, just as much information as possible. Right. But I know, being on the other side, the guy reading that doesn't want, if you have 10 of those to read, that becomes a lot. And you just start, monotonously going through it. But now if I get someone that's just giving me a page or page and a half or half a page, well, I can read that entire thing. Right. So what's your point? So when I did that, I didn't even address what they were asking for. I told them what they were missing. Like, hey, this isn't even in here, but my experience says like you're missing a key part of the solicitation, and this is what it is. This wasn't a solicitation. This was still pre-award. So I had a little flexibility as to what I could submit. But that got me a meeting where I was presenting on the other side of the country in person with the government, right? And those are the type of things. I'm just giving you that as an example. So look at things a little bit differently, especially if you're not seeing success. Don't be afraid to break the rules or modify them. Don't do anything illegal, right? But you don't have to follow the rules to the letter of the law when you're writing something like this or an email. Doing things a little bit different. He recommends doing something that's interesting. He said, hey, write 1 sentence a day, if you're stuck. Now he's talking about probably, writing a book. What if you got writer's block? But, what I find is what brings the most value is something to my business is usually the thing I'm trying to put off, right? So I like doing certain things and I put off doing others, right? So let's say I'm doing research, right? That's something I might be putting off. But once I start it, I really get into it and deep dive and get excited about it. If you just write a sentence a day, like let's say you have a proposal coming up, you just don't want to do it, start writing a sentence a day. If you write that 1 sentence, like for me, it almost never stops with 1 sentence. Sometimes it turns into a couple of pages. So try that. Try playing with 1 sentence a day and just write. I'm not going to give you a wicked long podcast on all his. You can buy that book and look at the exercises, see if something applies to you or if it doesn't. But I just wanted to give you, my thoughts on, hey, let's look at your responses to the government a little bit differently. So, and that's going to make your submission unique. Okay. So it's not just, everything we talk about, finding opportunities early, influencing the government. We have to be able to write and communicate as well. So, and sometimes that takes practice. So try some of what I recommended in this podcast. There are other books on creativity and writing. Go out and take a look at those and see what you can apply to your government sales process. One thing else I'm going to do here is I'm going to recommend another podcast. Okay, so this one's not mine. This one's one of my favorite business podcasts, and it's called Business Made Simple. The host is Donald Miller. He is an author. You may have read one of his books. He has one called Building a Story Brand, which is pretty popular. I think it was a bestseller. And, I've read a lot of his stuff or listened to it. He does a great job of walking you through how to be a business. Okay. Because there's a lot to selling to the government, but you want to sell commercially too, right? So I'm recommending this. He's not going to teach you how to sell to the government, but he is going to show you how to not only run a small business, but specifically, and what's linked to this episode is he has a process for telling a story that he walks through on some of his podcasts. I've taken his courses, by the way. He has courses on his website that you can take. And those courses walk you through how to go through that story process. And that's not just writing a book, right? He actually takes that and says, hey, this is how you apply it to business. And one of them is particular that's very useful is how to write an email, to someone that's going to read it. So whether it's email marketing, but look, even though they're talking commercial, you're writing to someone in the government. So taking his process for writing an email, he starts talking about, identifying pain points and, the hero's journey. If you've heard that before, he walks through how you do that in email and marketing. And I think that'd be valuable to listen to. So hopefully this is a short one, but hopefully I've given you some resources that you can use when you're marketing to the government, when you're running your small business, and this will help you commercially as well. So, and you might actually enjoy the creative process if it's not something you're typically involved in. Thanks for listening today, guys. Head on over to dodcontract.com if you want help selling to the government. We have the academy over there where you can take our courses that are on demand. We have weekly coaching where you can talk to me and some of our other experts on how to sell to the government. Subscribe to the podcast. Please leave a review. Let us know if there's anything you want us to cover on one of these episodes. So thanks again for tuning in this week. We'll see you next time. And by the way, I almost forgot this, but the quote that I gave you guys at the beginning of the podcast, creativity is allowing yourself to make mistakes, art is knowing which ones to keep. Dave Mustaine of Megadeth. Now, who would have thought Dave Mustaine of Megadeth, the Grammy Award-winning metal artist, would be helping us to win government contracts? But I think we can learn from everybody. And if we apply some of those skill sets to government contracting, then it can help us out. All right. See you next time.